7:30, and we're going to begin the Light Board meeting for October 2022, and we will begin with minutes. Now, I apologize, Pam, I have not been able to comb through my emails and see the back and forth. I trust in the board in reviewing the minutes, and I don't want to be the person that delays them. So tell me the status of minutes as we stand right now, Pam. Oh, I think you're.
Okay, so these are the July 13th minutes. I understand that the August minutes, which Wendy was really nice to agree to do, have not come in yet to her. Certainly, the September minutes have not come in to me, so we've got a backlog still. But the July 13th, which are the ones that you have recently received, have I got comments which I incorporated from Warren. I got an observation by Alice, which I acknowledged. I got feedback from Wendy with no additional comments, and having reviewed them myself and having the strength of the reviews that I've seen, I would say we should vote just to keep this process moving. It's a very, very awkward process right now, and I think there's it's not optimal by any means. There are a number of problems, but I don't want to go into them here. I just am now deciding on my own to just forge ahead best that I can. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for Karen by having us provide her with the reports. And they should be attached to the minutes in draft when you get them from me, but I'm not getting them on time. So that's something that, Brian, if you have a chair's report, Dave, yours report, the broadband report should be brought to Karen prior to her sending me drafts, if possible. But I'm just doing what I can. For now, I suggest we vote on the July 13th minutes. I certainly think they're okay.
And you're muted.
Now I'm muted. Would someone like to make a motion for the July 13th minutes?
I make a motion that we approve the July 13th minutes as reviewed and distributed by Pam.
Excellent.
Second.
Thank you. Pam?
Yes.
Warren? Warren, would you like? Oh, give me a thumbs up if you want to approve. All right, great. You're not muted, but I can't hear you. Alice?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
And I'm going to abstain because I didn't review them, but I trust that they look great. So
Brian, just one other comment. The August 17th minutes came last night, so I will distribute them this weekend along with the materials from the original meeting, so people have those for review.
Excellent. And I will follow up. And it have to be later in the month because I'm going to be on the road for the next 2 weeks with Pam and just see where we are in minutes and see if I can't help in any way get us caught up.
Well, I think it's all a matter of how seriously we want to take this. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
It really boils down to that. We being the light plant management as well as us, they are often delayed. They are, maybe it's really not that important. And if that's the sense of the board, well,
Well, we have an obligation to do them and do them well so that people can understand them. So I'll make a note to follow up with you later in the month, and we'll do that over email. Let's see. So the next meetings that
I must say that I know that Karen's doing the best she can under the circumstances. I
right.
think
I'm sure if I was talking to people outside of the meeting, I'd know more about the reasons for where we are, but I'll deal with that later in the month.
Yep.
So our next meeting is November 9th, and then followed by December 14th to finish out the year. And I'm going to move on to the chair's report is next. I don't have any specific updates, so I'm going to move on to the director's update.
Hey, good morning. We continue to work on the middle school project. SDA has submitted 60% design drawings to SMMA, who's the architect for the middle school. After we submitted those, they did make a change to the inverters because the inverters that were designed were didn't like the production. So they've modified those as well as the ones for the rooftop so that we have one inverter style for the school for the project. Makes a lot of sense opposed to having two different styles. So it'll be single inverter, which is good for us. Solar Design Associates has engaged TerraSmart to do the design for the canopies. And what that means is they're doing the structural design for the canopy frames and all that, not the solar piece of it, right? So what the solar attaches to. So that's going to be a good partnership there. I'm working with planning and land management on the permits, and we will have to do a special application. So more to come on that. I don't know exactly what that's going to entail in terms of workload and whatnot. That came up in our conversation with SMMA and SDA. And so I started that process and working with Marcia and her team on that. So we'll see, but still moving along. A lot of work with the project, a lot of time. I've been mentioning over the past, 18 months about the supply chain issues. And I put in my report about 320 amp meters. Specifically, the lead time on those are over 12 months. It's created some issues potentially for us when we do underground conversions. But really what we're dealing with right now is new customers that are putting 320 amp services can't get the meter sockets. So their electricians are putting in two 200 amp sockets, which, doesn't violate any electric code, but it is an issue for us because if you have to shut off power, you got to shut off 2 meters. Fire department doesn't like it. So we've been dealing with that. We do have an agreement in place for electricians and homeowners that put two 200 amp services in to replace those once the 320 amps come in. But in the meantime, what that means is a house could have 2 electric services, and that's problematic, right? So you have 2 accounts. And I don't see the problem going away for the next, 24 to 36 months because the supply chain isn't changing. So again, it's an issue. You have a single house, 2 electric accounts, 2 meter charges where they normally would have 1.
They're getting 2 meter charges,
Yep.
but they're one customer. And it's just
Exactly.
because we need 2 meters.
Yeah, it's because they have 2 accounts set up. It's no different than if they have a account on their garage and one on their house. So yeah, it's a problem.
Well, yeah, that I don't believe that was our intent with those.
It's not our intent, but because they can't get the meter socket, we have 2 accounts set up. And it's a problem. So
Yeah, we're going to have to talk more about that because that doesn't seem fair.
I don't disagree with that, but right now that's the way it's set up. We don't have a way around it. You can't merge it and you're basically setting up 2 accounts. So we can talk about that the next meeting, Brian, if you want in detail, because it is an issue right now.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to unfairly be overcharging customers because of, supply chain issue. It seems to me like something in the billing system could easily say that these 2, meters are on one account and, they're not sub metered and they get one fixed fee. So.
Yeah, we can have a longer conversation about it at the next meeting, but we also have to keep in mind that, we don't want this to be there forever. And there's got to be an incentive for them to get off of it. So,
Billing
Okay.
alone should do that.
Yeah. We've been working on the 5-year capital plan for both electric and broadband. We're in a pretty good position at this point. And we're hoping to finalize that soon. Once that's done, we'll share that with the board. It's part of our annual process. And again, things change, but we're going on what we know at this point. So it's in pretty good shape. We've been spending quite a bit of time over the last 30 days on the class and compensation study that the town has embarked on. And it's been nothing short of a heavy lift at this point. All the employees have completed a job analysis questionnaire, as well as reviewed their job descriptions. They've submitted those to their supervisors who have reviewed them, and they've submitted them to me, and I've reviewed all of them and commented where needed, added things that were missed. Big lift, a lot of work, but important step for our department and the town, and we're moving on to the next step in the process, which will be interviews. So the consultant will be interviewing employees about their responsibilities, and we'll go from there. We recently hired a grade 1 line worker, so that's good news.
And
So far, the employee's been good, and we're excited to have him on board. We
And
still
how
have
many-
openings.
Yes, I was going to ask that question.
We still have openings too. We just received another applicant yesterday, so it's active. We're looking at it. But we're not in bad shape, but we would like to fill the other 2 positions.
Anything other than line workers that's unfilled?
Yep, we're working, Jason and I are working for a network engineer as it pertains to the light plant. I'm not gonna steal his thunder because he's got an announcement to make in his report. But that's my report for today.
Great, thank you. And with that, are there any questions from the board? Alice?
I don't, I think, and can you, Dave, in one sentence, tell me why does somebody want 320?
I don't know if I can. go
I'm
one
just trying to
sentence, but I'll
understand
try.
this.
So we, in Concord, most of the houses that are built now require more than a 200 amp service. And so you could put a full 400 amp service, but most go after the 320, which is considered a 400 amp service. It's just not a full 400 amp service. So it's very common in this community for those. And, the 200 amp services, which we'd see in many communities, which is common, 320 is common for us in Concord.
And that has to do with that, we're talking about mostly new construction and these McMansions, right?
Yeah, and you also see it when people upgrade, right? So if they had an addition or they decided they wanted to put a pool in or whatever the case, you get bumped up to the next level. So it's very common. It's been common for years here.
Yeah, go ahead, Wendy, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, what about our other incentives? Like if we're incentivizing solar and the heat pumps and all of that, does that typically require upgrades? I would assume it would.
In some cases it does.
Yeah.
It's on a case by case basis.
Okay.
Yeah, so to answer Alice's question, I have a very efficient house, but I had to put in 400 amp service because I had so many rooms to put circuits to. I needed enough breakers. So I would require one of those 320 meters, my panels. But I had a question about the middle school. You had said there was conversations continuing. Can we schedule a public meeting now that we're at 60% construction documents to show the community what it's going to look like? That way we can start to incorporate their feedback into that 90% drawings.
I think we probably can. Let me just check with Solar Design Associates to make sure they're comfortable with it as well, but I'm comfortable with it. So
Great.
Let me verify that and then I'll circle back with you.
Yeah, I think the community would really love to see the solar side of that project.
Yeah, I think, we've had enough changes from the start to now where I don't expect too many more. Obviously with the special permit, that could change things, but I don't
Yeah.
know that it would be that significant. So yeah, let me talk with the consultant and then I'll get back to you and we can plan on scheduling something.
Right. And yeah, that's why I'd like to see this meeting happen in the next month, is because the public will come up with things you're not thinking about. And if we're at 90% construction documents, we won't really be able to address their concerns. So excellent. Are we ready to move on? Do anyone else have any questions for Dave? Seeing none, Jason, would you like to provide your update?
Absolutely, thank you. So thank you all for the opportunity to come before the board today. My monthly update will be posted shortly on the town's website, concordma.gov/broadband. And I encourage anyone to reach out if they have any questions or feedback to broadband@concordma.gov. So first, I'm happy to say that we have a new broadband manager. He started yesterday. His name is Dale Hartling, and he has over 30 years of network management experience. He worked for Cisco most recently for over 20 years as a manager of a network team there. And he is very excited to be a part of this team, and he shares the community's vision for what broadband is and can be. So Dave and I are just really happy to have found Dale and to have him be part of the team. So I think that everybody's going to be really happy to see the progress that we're going to be able to make now that we've got a division manager there leading that group of people. So Dale will oversee the telecom technicians, the ones who actually do fiber splicing and installing, and the network engineers, which we have one currently in place, and then one, as Dave mentioned, that's vacant. We are working on filling that. It was posted until filled. We've received almost 30 applicants. We've conducted 3 first-round interviews and 2 second-round interviews. I just have not found the right fit for this position. It is tricky to find somebody with the right blend of network experience and broadband experience, because it is a different type of networking. You want somebody who has fiber experience and understands the fiber to the home technology. So we do get applicants. We got one yesterday routinely. So we're optimistic that with Dale on board, we can get somebody in this position soon. So that's good. I wanted to give an update on the fiber splicing that's been going on recently. So if you'll remember, in December of last year, we had a rodent chew through several fibers in a handhole near an LCC on Losbrook Road. Emergency splicing was done to get the customers back online, but it was really just a temporary solution, and we didn't want to go through another winter with that cable in that precarious situation. So we got a third-party contractor to help us do this cutting and splicing. We're going to be replacing 5 cables. They range from 24 strand to 96 strand. It takes an incredibly long time to properly dress and prepare and splice and then patch these fibers. So I think the longest nights, they started their prep work at 8 p.m. The cuts were closer to 10 p.m. and the final splicing was done at 6 a.m. Most customers were not down for that entire time. In fact, none were down for that entire range, but that just gives you an idea of how much work is involved. We do have one of our team members on site, and I was participating remotely to track the customers and how long they are down and make sure that everybody comes back up. And so it's really a huge team effort. When we do that splicing, we did 3 days, not last week, but the week before, and we've got 2 more days that are going to be coming next week, next Tuesday and Thursday, or Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm sorry. We'll be notifying people on the website, social media, and reaching out directly to the customers that will be impacted. There are only 55 customers that are impacted in this splicing work, and usually it's between 8 and 20 that are impacted with each splice. So we've got just 2 cables left, and one of them is only a single fiber that's in use. So hopefully it's not going to be too impactful, but this will allow us to make sure that this fiber can weather future years and won't be compromised in any way. So I thank everyone for their patience, and most people have been very understanding and appreciate that we're doing the work at night when it's not as impactful. We are wrapping up the RFP process for our help desk services. We've completed all the steps. Now we've got the contract with the vendor. who successfully bid. And once it's executed, it'll come back to the town. We can issue the purchase order, and that long process will be done. The current help desk provider was the successful bidder, and so there will be no interruption in service for customers and no changes needed by our internal staff. And we look forward to working with them moving forward, and also using the opportunity with a new broadband manager coming on board as kind of a reset to make sure we have constant communication going both ways, so that their team is notified of any changes or work that we're doing, so that they can accurately communicate that to customers. And that, if there are problems that we hear about from customers, that they're not happy with an answer that they were told or was inaccurate, that we can correct that information and make sure we have a good relationship with our provider. In this month's update, which is they're getting longer, but a lot of it's just metrics. I added a new metric, which is disconnects. It's something we talked about. It's helpful to see the number of new customers that we add, but it's also helpful to see the number of customers that drop off. And I can tell you the vast majority are people who move out and are no longer able to maintain their service for that reason. It's very rare that we have somebody who cancels for another reason. And if so, it's usually because of services that we don't offer, like television or phone. But since I've started, we've only had one customer out of dozens and dozens who left, not because of, or let me clarify that. We've only had one customer who left because they were not happy with the service levels that they were able to get or the services that we offered. And every other customer that's left has been because they moved out of their residence and could no longer keep the service. So it's important to track because it does take work. There's deprovisioning that happens, ONTs that need to be tested and labeled. And so it's work that we're doing. It's just not, work that we certainly celebrate, but it's important to keep track of that so that we can make sure that it matches the housing market and doesn't seem to go awry. And we also are now tracking since February of this year, have been tracking why customers are leaving. So we do have that metric as well, and we'll try to get that data correlated for future updates so that we can show exactly what I'm saying, that the vast majority of people who are leaving because they're moving. And the last part of my update has to do with the rates and tiers, but I'll pause here and maybe ask if there's any questions on my update before we move into that next section.
So I had a question. I noticed activity with disconnects and new customer interest happened in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, mirroring the real estate? Is that the turnover of people
Exactly.
outside the school year?
Yeah, we get a lot of people interested in new service and a lot of people who move away and are just no longer able to keep their service. So, and one of the things that I've mentioned previously that we're trying to go after are those customers that were once customers, have already had the fiber run to their premise and have already had the splicing done and everything ready, and then they've moved out, somebody else has moved in. We're trying to make sure that we stay in constant contact with those people to make them aware that our service is available, and those customers are very easy for us to install, can be done in 20 or 30 minutes at the most, and it's a very low cost for us. So we're keeping an eye on those customers, and if they don't sign up immediately after, we try to reach out to them and let them know of the service.
Excellent.
Can I ask about those customers, the folks who have moved in? Have you tried to do any surveying of folks who've moved into a house that had previous service who didn't take your service to find out why they didn't choose the broadband service?
We have not specifically looked at people who did not yet sign up. I think we've reached out to say, just a reminder, this is available, but I think that it might not be a huge number of people that would respond, but I think it would be incredibly helpful to find out in their words, what it was about the service that they, why they didn't choose it. So I think that's a great suggestion, and we'll look into doing that.
Excellent. Any other questions from the board? Well, Jason, I think we'll move on to the next section of your well, I guess the next agenda topic, the speeds and rates.
Great. Dave, do we need to do anything specific?
No, I just wanted to add one thing, and I was muted, so it didn't come out. So I apologize for that. But one of the things that Jason has identified is the customers that have moved out that have, those homes have broadband there. We've identified those as kind of low-hanging fruit, so we know who they are and how many they are, which I think is helpful.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Jason. Go right ahead.
Great, thank you. So I'm here this month for this topic to look for the board's support and some changes that we'd like to make to the tiers and speeds that we offer to customers. We think that it's important to get this out in front of people and make sure that it's discussed and that people have input and that the board hopefully agrees with the changes that we're proposing. I've vetted these changes with Dave and with Carrie LaFleur, the town manager, and they're both very supportive and think that this is going to help us remain competitive and continue to give customers what they're looking for.
So Jason, real quick, we're not looking for a vote today. This is more presentation and collecting feedback. And then at the next meeting, we would be looking for a vote on it.
So the process to date has been a research phase for us conducting internally, a public input phase, a development phase, an analysis phase, and then this now, which is kind of the presentation phase. And then hopefully at the next meeting, we'll get a vote on this. So you'll remember that we distributed a survey and got overwhelming response from customers and the public. We had 297 responses and it comprised 15% of our current customer base responded to this survey. And the key takeaways were that the vast majority of people were actually happy with the speeds that we offer and the prices that they were paying. People who were not satisfied overwhelmingly because they wanted faster speeds. And people were not bothered by having too many speeds. We were concerned that if we just kept adding tiers, that would cause confusion for customers, and that potentially we wanted to keep things simple and maybe just adjust all the tiers and rates. But customers told us that they were not concerned with that they know kind of the speed that they're looking for, and they just want to make sure that we offer that speed for them. And then a growing number of people, which was almost 30%, are thinking that our rates could be considered a barrier for a customer signing up. And so we wanted to be mindful that it might not be desirable to increase rates, even though costs are going up. So we had 3 goals when we were looking to make these recommendations. 1, offer a low income tier. 2, offer faster speeds for both residential and commercial or business customers. Then determine if the existing speeds and tiers are competitive, and then get feedback on the tiers from the customers and community. So based on the feedback that we received, we're recommending a few changes. I prepared a 2-page summary of all of these changes and with everything highlighted in red that we would be changing, and also has a brief background and explanation of everything. And you can find that in the packet today. That'll be posted on our website as soon as this meeting is over. But I'll just highlight the main changes. So we're going to be looking to add a low income residential tier, which would be 25 megabits per second, symmetrical up and down, for $24.95 per month. And this would be only eligible for people who are eligible for the Light Plant's assistance rate. They're currently short, a little over 100 people, I think. Maybe Carol can correct me if I'm grossly misrepresenting that, but there's 100 and something people that I think are eligible for that. And there's only a handful that are actually current broadband customers. We don't think this would be a huge impact on the revenue that we take in, but we think it would be, championing the spirit of Concord Broadband for being a community resource and making sure that it's accessible for all people. We also think there could be a subsidy that the Concord Broadband might receive from the government, and we'll pursue that. But nevertheless, we think that it's something that would be important for the community to do. And then we'd be looking to add 2 high-speed residential tiers, 500 over 500 and 1 gig over 1 gig, for $109.95 and $149.95 respectively. This is what customers have told us. Dozens and dozens of people told us that they were looking for. Based on the analysis that we've done, we think about between 15 and 40 customers would make the initial jump to one of these tiers. Remember, we do have a strong majority of customers who are residential customers, so we don't expect as much movement among the business customers, maybe the same proportion, but because there are a lot fewer customers, not as many in number. But and then add a high-speed business tier, 1 gig over 1 gig, which would be $349.95. Remember that the business customers get a much lower resolution time guaranteed, so that they get a up to 2-hour response time depending on the tier, which is why those services cost more for business customers. And they also tend to use a higher proportion of the bandwidth that they pay for. And then I did want to mention that these 3 tiers, these new fast high speed tiers, would be subject to availability. There might be some engineering that needs to happen. Basically, if you think about it, a customer may share a single fiber with several other customers. And what we want to make sure is that we're not oversubscribing those fibers so that people can actually get the guaranteed speeds. As you know, sometimes cable or other providers don't necessarily do this, which means that in peak demand times, you're not necessarily going to get the speeds that you pay for. We want to make sure that that doesn't happen, that customers can get the speeds that they pay for. So if a particular customer that might share their fiber with several other customers is looking to go a huge jump in speed, we may need to just move them to a different fiber. It doesn't require any work at the house. It's all work that's done in a splice case or a cabinet. And so we just want to make sure that we're clear that some people, it would be the click of a mouse to change their speed, but some of these faster speeds, we may need to run out to the field and kind of move the wire around, the cable around, so that we make sure that we're not oversaturating some of these circuits. And the last change that we're looking to make is to be able to waive installation costs for customers who have already paid installation costs, or premises that have already paid their installation costs. So we currently charge $150 installation fee for residential customers, and for business customers, they pay time and materials for the actual installation. But for residential customers, we'd be looking to waive that $150 fee if we've already brought fiber to the premise, and if they have not altered the service in any dramatic way. So do you think, we talked about that pool of people, we're coming up on almost 400 locations that have had Concord broadband service that have not signed up for it, subsequently. We'd like to be able to reach out to those people to say, look, we realize that all we need to do is give you an ONT and have you plug it in. And that cost for us is going to be much, much lower than it was the initial time. And I think it would make us more competitive with the other companies that don't charge an installation fee. So those are the majority of or all of the changes that we're looking to make. I'm sorry, there's one last change. We're not looking to increase the fees on any existing tiers, and we are looking to increase the residential tier, the lowest entry residential speed, which is 35 over 35. We'd like to bump that up to 45 over 45. You can see in my update, I've got a few charts as to why we'd like to do that, but basically it boils down to the cost per megabit per second. We want to make sure that it doesn't go out of line with the business tiers that we offer, and that the curve is maintained for that rate once we add this new low income tier. So this would just be a benefit to those customers who are on the entry tier, and we want to just keep that price for them per megabit per second in line with our other tiers. And those are all the changes that we're looking to make.
And just a point of clarification on the low income rate that Jason was talking about.
Yeah.
The last I checked, there was 162 customers on the low income rate.
Thank you.
Excellent. So I have a couple questions. The low income rate that's proposed is $25 and 25 megabits per second. I would rather see a qualified low income rate be equivalent to the entry level rate, the 45 up and down, but priced at 50% subsidy, because these people, they have the same needs as everyone else. If they've got children in the school system and they're using Zoom, there's no reason why we should penalize them with a slower speed. One additional question I had is, are there customers that really don't use, they just need internet for email or basic functions? Could we offer a non-qualified low bandwidth rate at a low price, like the 25 speed for $25 a month to residents? Is there an investment issue with that small rate?
So the feedback we got was that people weren't necessarily looking for that, but I do agree that there must be some people that really just have basic needs. They don't necessarily watch streaming services, but they do need basic internet connectivity. Yeah, that's something we could definitely discuss internally and figure out if that is going to be beneficial. We can also make the other changes suggested, and then see how that plays out and what if people are still demanding or looking for that lower speed. But yeah, it's definitely a good idea to consider.
Great. And the not charging an installation charge when we've already installed it for a previous customer makes a lot of sense. But could get tricky if you've turned over the house and a new resident lives there. They benefit when another resident that's been living here forever wants to buy in, has to pay that fee. I can see both sides of that. Wendy, you have a question.
Yeah, so one of them was exactly the same as yours, Brian, which was the low income, and why is it 25? Why is not just the 45? So I would support that. And then, and I certainly support the recommendations that you're making, Jason. And it's just a comment. I always struggle with trying to figure out how competitive we are in the market. So, I'm a customer that has streaming, right? So, but we have differences, obviously, our download speed and upload speed is different. So just for comparison, we have a download speed of 600 and upload of 20, which is fine, but I only pay $60. And then I look at this for 500 and it's $109. It's just so difficult for consumers to compare and contrast rates that I just wonder what we can do to help some of our customers understand the complexity and the reasonableness of what you're offering as a service. So just a comment, I always struggle with this topic. Don't know if we actually have sort of comparable competitive information that could be shared when we discuss these rates.
Yeah, okay.
Great. Warren, I've got a question, but I'm going to have Warren go.
Yeah, so my question was about the possibility of having this very low rate for folks who don't use the service much, really have a 25 by 25 rate. Do you get data that allows you to know how much people are actually using the service so that you could, on the engineering side, predict how many folks could actually benefit from something like that?
Yes, we do.
Because then that might, it seems like before going out and offering that, it does seem like it would be worth doing the engineering analysis to see whether there really is a market.
Right. Well, and so I think the thing is, it's kind of like most people don't need to go over 70 miles an hour, but if you asked how many people wanted to buy a car that never went over 70 miles an hour, everybody would say they didn't, because there may be a time when they need that to pass somebody on the highway. But so I think that there are customers who may consistently use 20 megabits per second all month long, but then suddenly they've got people over and they don't want to be capped at that speed. And so I think that you might see trends where you could say, gosh, 200 customers over here could probably fit into this new lower tier for lower money, but the majority of them may not want to be boxed into that rate. But we have looked at the engineering and the back end and the usage, and it seems to align with what people say that they want. But I would agree that some people, like, Wendy talked about the 600, Comcast, Verizon, others, they do tend to play the speed game a little bit, and they make people think that maybe they need more than they do. It's fewer than 20 megabits per second to stream at 5K or 4K rather. And, most people who have 35 over 35 will be fine for that, and, and do everything else that they're trying to do. But it's true, if you have a large house, or if you, do a lot of cloud backups, or you have a podcasting business or streaming something that you're doing. So there's a lot of uses for faster bandwidth, but I think that we don't want to get into the speed game where we try to tell everybody that they need a lot more than they do. But it seems like the people that talked about the tiers that they were in were really happy with the speeds that they got, and that they were they were delivering on the speeds that we promised. So it seems to match, but I definitely agree. I could call up a lot of people and say, you're paying for 150, but you're really only using 75 most of the month. And I still think the vast majority of them would prefer to stick with that because they know they have it if they need it.
Yeah. Hey, can I ask one follow-up question? Why do you have the same upload and download speeds in contrast to Comcast and others like Wendy suggested that have different speeds for download and upload?
Yeah, so for decades now, networking has been full duplex, which means you can get the same speed going in both directions. The reason that cable providers don't offer symmetrical service or even DSL providers is because the nature of the equipment that was designed and put in there, from the central office to your house, there's a lot of equipment in between. That equipment has repeaters and splitters and amplifiers. All of it was designed to send 90% of the data to the home and only 10% back, because they only need a little bit of data about where this is going, who is paid for what channel, things like that. So when the system was designed, it wasn't designed with the intention to allow data to flow in both directions at the same rate. So that's why it's a lot easier for them to offer much faster speeds going to the homes than it is the other way around. I will say that in the long term, we don't anticipate that being a competitive advantage, because they are looking to replace that equipment as more and more people can't do with the low upload speeds that they offer. I think that, for us, our competitive advantage is that we are a community-driven resource. We are comprised of people who live and work in this community, and we care about it. And that's the differentiation. It's never going to be about pricing. It's never going to be about the features that we offer, even though we think that we do offer a better guaranteed service and have better customer support and all these other things. I think in the long run, it has to be our priority on a community-driven resource that will make sure that people see us and trust us, as opposed to a big company that is not within the bounds of the community.
So I want to ask one quick question, and then I'll go to Alice. So the barber that cuts my hair, he has TV and phone with Comcast, and he's paying like $240 a month. I'm sure we could offer him something less expensive, but his needs for bandwidth are very small, more in line with a basic resident. And he doesn't need, well, I guess for the phone, he would want, uptime, but I think he would go with a landline. Anyway, my point is, there's a 2-hour response built into the pricing for businesses. What if a business does not need that service? Is there a way to qualify them as a resident, or to break out the cost of that support?
Yeah, well, the 2-hour response time is really only for the enterprise class, the class of service for businesses. It gets lower response time for the lower tiers. So I don't have it in front of me, but it's something like an 8-hour response time for the lower tiers, and it is a lot less money. So they wouldn't have to pay $300.
4-hour response. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
That's
So, but
all
yeah,
right.
I mean, it's something that could be considered. I mean, I think that, it depends on the type of business, obviously, what their demands are. I mean, Emerson Hospital has very different demands than a barber. And so I would agree that, we have only a few dozen business subscribers anyway, so it's not a huge business, but yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Jason, but I am noticing we're starting to get behind on the agenda. Alice, you had a question.
I think my question is a quick one. I'm stuck on, I'm sorry about this, on our low income rates. And I want to make sure I heard the numbers right. There are 165 residents who qualify or they are currently on broadband?
No, the 160 something was the number of customers who qualify for the electrical rate assistance program for their electricity rates. And only a handful of them are current broadband customers.
That's what I needed to understand. I heard it a little differently, and I was looking, wow, 25% of our customers are low income. Sounded a little out of proportion. So thank you. That's all I needed.
Okay, and Mark, if you have a quick question, I would appreciate it.
Sure, just briefly, I appreciate what Jason is doing, and I'm generally supportive of all of it, although I do agree with those of you that have made the comment about the low income tier being the same as the enterprise. Just a quick comment on the small businesses, because we did deal with this quite a bit. they do get a 4-hour response time. One of the things about businesses is they're only open certain times of the day, and it's very important to them to be, have functional service at the same time. So we heavily discouraged businesses from trying to say they were residences just to save them, $20 a month at the low end, because the responsiveness needed to be different. And there is, I believe, a good rationale for doing that. Now, maybe there's a opportunity for a small, just on the low end. One more comment I'll make is, because of the way we allocate costs in our service, it does get a little bit tricky to go much lower than some of the low end pricing that we have in terms of actually recovering the fixed costs for delivering service to any particular premise. I think the low income is a separate thing, because the opportunity for subsidies and other sources of income that can make that, there's a really good case for that. But I think for customers who presumably have the affordability, I would be careful about dropping the lowest prices.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great summary of the question I had about that 25 was, do we collect enough at that $25? I mean, maybe the 25 is, $30 or $35 or something lower than what Comcast is offering for people who just need something basic, but it does need, whatever that rate is, does need to collect for its expense. So
yeah, and my point is, low income is subsidized
yes,
from other source, which makes it okay to do for that particular condition, but might not be appropriate as the entry level service.
Yeah, two different topics. All right. Is there any other board questions related to this discussion about broadband rates? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to our next topic in the agenda, which is the AMS project update.
Well, I'm going to take that one. See if I can kind of keep us on track. We've had quite a bit of movement on the project in general. As you guys know, we've been working on contract negotiations and all that for a little while. Pleased to report that the contract's executed with Eaton. We have our kickoff meeting scheduled with them November 3rd and 4th. So that's exciting. I'm working through a number of things in the project. The project is a $2.67 million project. I want to highlight a couple things there. 2.67 million is not all electric. There's water in there as well. So about $500,000 is for the water meters. So that puts us in a little over 2 million for the product itself. And you might recall that we got authorization for borrowing up to 3 million. So, it's looking like we might still stay under the 3 million, depending on how we do the installation, which is great. Right now, we're working with Eaton for them to execute their bid bonds. So that's being communicated with them. We internally, we're working on a deployment strategy still. And some of it's going to depend on delivery times, and we're starting to get some of that information in. So the commercial meters, looking at 61 weeks, which is a long time. The residential, you're looking at 26 weeks. So we had originally planned on a third party for installations because we thought, maybe all the meters would come in relatively at the same time. But we were looking at bringing in retired employees that know Concord to do installations. And that's going to save us some money, but also bring in employees that know the community. So we're continuing to look at that. We're not throwing out the idea of bringing in a third party because we may need to do that still. But quite honestly, from my standpoint, I'm hoping to be able to do it internally and supplementing with retired employees, because that just makes life a lot easier and it's going to cost us a lot less. So we're looking at the options. Eaton is currently doing a final look at their network design. So what that means is right now in their design, there's 15 gateways that are set up. Those are the first pieces that need to be installed. Otherwise, the meters won't be able to communicate back. So as I said, they're working on that. And once we get that design, we'll be able to take a look at it from an operational standpoint of, do we need to do anything in the field to accommodate those gateways? Do we need to request them to relocate them one pole up or down because the pole they put it on is busy with other networking equipment? So a lot of those details we're working on. But you know, it's moving along quite well. We've been in contact with NISC, and we are on their schedule for late January, early February for a kickoff meeting for that. So while we have the AMS project going, we also have to make sure the billing system is set up and ready to go. And so there's two pieces to that. And you know, we've been working with them on that. We also are looking at meter inventory management, and it sounds like, well, what's that mean? And essentially, the vendor is looking to ship. They said all the meters, so I'm assuming they mean all the residential at once and all the commercial at once. So we're looking for clarification on that. What I've done is I've worked with our inventory person here at the light plant, and we've identified that we can house all the meters as they come in. So we have room for them. They'll be under the roof, you know, in a secure location. So we can manage that. We have to do a little adjustment, but that's a really good thing, because originally we thought we were going to have to get storage containers and stuff like that, and we're not going to need to. Likewise, looking through things, there's a retention for the old meters. And our consultant talked to us about this, where, you know, we were originally thinking, okay, we'll just recycle the meters when they come in, but by law, you have to keep them for 6 months. And so we've designed, you know, a system that allow us to keep the meters for 6 months. And that way, if a customer does have a high bill inquiry or anything like that, we can then go to the meter, pull it, and run the analysis on it. So we have all that stuff in place. Brian?
Just a quick question about meters, and I believe we don't hold on to a lot of spare meters because of a financial calculation. Is that the payment in lieu of taxes? What is the reason why we don't hold a lot of meters on hand?
Well,
Generally,
in your reference to the pilot is maybe a little outdated, because the pilot's not based on capital anymore. But you are correct in the fact that when we buy a meter, it is immediately, just like transformers, put to capital, whether it's in use or not. So we're going to retain those meters for the 6 months before we recycle them. So the capital will not decrease until we recycle them, but it doesn't impact the pilot.
but it doesn't having more in the capital number doesn't affect other financial payments that we make.
No.
Okay. All right.
So we have done, in terms of recycling the meters, we did take an old meter, pull it apart, and just, you know, see what's in there for value. And we're going to have a couple recyclers in to take a look and see what kind of value we could get out of the old meters. So, you know, that we don't have an answer to yet, but internally we have looked at it, and we want to recycle the materials, but we also want to recoup any costs we can. So kind of looking at it from two vantage points. Now, in terms of retention of the meters, we've also identified how we would store those, how we would track them, so that if someone does have a high bill inquiry, we can, you know, you think about it, it's 8,500 meters, say potentially 50% of that at any given time. How are you going to find that meter? And we've identified a process already to make that easy on staff. So that's a good thing. And what else did I have? As I mentioned, water is included in this, and on the PO, everything's broken out. Water is paying a portion of, the software, all of that. The bulk of it is electric. It's an 80%, 20% split, which is pretty normal for us. It's kind of standard practice. And we're looking at, how we install their stuff as well as we go out and install the new meters. So we're meeting regularly with the internal team, as well as water's included in that. So they've been involved all the way through, which is great.
Excellent. So Dave, I had asked if we could talk about the functionality
Yep.
and the benefits, but I don't think we're going to have time for that today because we're 5 minutes. So, and I'd like to ask a quick question. Today, I know there's a lot of what ifs, but when do you think we'd be at the point where we have all the meters installed and deployed around town? I know give me a range, because
So basically the commercial lead time on the meters is 57 weeks, right? And then Eaton has 4 weeks to provision the meters and then get them to us. So if we gave the go ahead today, those meters wouldn't be coming in for 61 weeks. And then installation of them, if you look at it from a residential side, you have 26-week lead time. So basically 6 months, right?
Yeah.
And then 6,500 meters. We just started the discussion yesterday on how many meters an employee can install on an average day. And that really is going to vary depending on where they are. So example I would give is if they were up at Concord News or Concord Green, you're going to put a lot of meters in a day because there's so many in close proximity. But if you were on a road that's, a long road like Monument Street, that things are spread out, it's going to take a little longer. So we're doing some internal analysis on that. And once we finalize that, I'll be able to better answer your question, Brian. But
yeah.
I do think, I will share that, my initial analysis of 30 meters per installer a day, came back at about 22 weeks to install the residential meters. So I think once we get those, we'll be able to move along fairly quickly. We do need to do more analysis because, like I said, there's so many different areas in town where things are spread out and whatnot. But I just wanted to give you an idea of where we were with that. Now, that said, the commercial side is a whole different ballgame.
Okay.
The G1 customers are easy to install. G2s aren't that difficult. The G3s is going to take a little more work because it's more complicated. All of that's going to be done internally with staff here. Even if we did decide we needed to bring in a third party to do installs, they would be doing residential and maybe some G1 customers. The G2 and G3 are all going to be done by our staff internally because it's much more complicated.
So I'm kind of doing all that math in my head, and so we're looking at the end of 2024 to actually have this system in the field.
Fully functioning, yes, but it will be functioning in 23 most likely, just not all the customers.
Okay. Lots of questions from the board, so let's start with Pam.
Yeah, just quickly on the recycling question, you mentioned retaining old meters and then looking at the value of recycling as opposed to, I gather, the value of throwing away, or what? I don't. The gist of my question is simply: are we responsibly recycling meters? And subsidiary question is: what is the volume, the actual volume of the numbers of meters that we're going to be having to, shall we say, dispose of?
So first, I want to make sure we're clear. We're not planning on disposing. We're planning on recycling.
Okay.
So when I talked about pulling them apart and seeing what value was in them, when we recycle them, we'll end up getting a bid for them, and the bidders will provide a cost that they'll pay us for them. But they'll end up breaking them down. There's copper in the meters. There's
Yeah.
other precious metals. And as we know, if you've been paying attention to the markets, there's a desire for that stuff. So 100% recycle, but there should be some value coming back to us, opposed to paying to dispose of them.
Thanks, thanks.
Yeah, and remind me, Dave, but I met in California a recycler of solar panels in South Hadley, Massachusetts. So he's based out of here. I just happened to meet him at a conference in California, but he would be a great guy to talk to get one of those bidders on recycling those materials.
Yeah, we can connect on that. That'd be
Sorry, Wendy.
I'll be quick. So I just really appreciate the effort that we're making on recycling. I think that's important. And the second one is more just a comment, Brian, to you and Dave around time of use rates. So as we start thinking about it, we got to get going on this rate because it's a long process and we need to educate consumers, et cetera. So we need a plan, I think, to work on that. So just I'll leave it there. And I know in a future meeting, we'll talk more. Thanks.
Yeah, Wendy, I'm, I want to do those rate philosophy discussions. We've got a lot of them sitting on my, future topics to talk about. I would like to ask, maybe I'll do it by email to see what people's willingness would be to add a meeting to just talk about rate philosophy, to keep that moving forward, because those were on my future topics, this time last year. So it'd be good to get to them.
Brian,
Yeah.
since you mentioned an extra meeting potentially,
Okay.
I don't think I put on the agenda that we would have a special meeting in December to finalize the budget. So
Yes.
my apologies for not putting that on there. November's difficult to have two meetings just because of the holidays and whatnot. So we want to keep that in mind as well.
And yeah, so again, this is gets complicated with getting everybody together to do these meetings. So do you have I think I saw a date for a proposed budget meeting. Do you have that in front of you?
I didn't propose one. It's something that we normally reach out to the board on availability and figure out what works best for you guys.
Okay.
So that'll be coming shortly.
We'll make sure to put it on the November 9th agenda.
And Dave, we usually do that at the end of December, right?
Yeah.
We've been doing it last couple of times then.
Yeah. The last few times it's been late in December.
Which worked well, actually.
Yeah, and we're in pretty good shape, but there are a lot of things coming up,
Right.
like
Great.
2023 rates just in general.
Yeah, I figured.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Brian, could you give us a schedule of what you think the needs are for these rate philosophy discussions? I mean, how many are we talking about and over what period of time? It would be nice to be able to see.
I'll share the Word document I have. So I have a running Word document that has the topic, background, and purpose for each discussion that I'd like to have. And then I use that to fill in the rest of the meeting. But I'll share that with you, and we can go from there.
I think it
And
might
Brian,
be
just-
just to have the board have a chance to comment on that, because this is time consuming stuff, so we want to be sure we're all focused on the right things.
Okay.
So thanks for doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wendy.
Just a quick comment. I mean, this goes back to the work that that Laura had raised months ago, and we did start some of those discussions. So it would be good for people to go back and look at the minutes on a couple of topics that we did go through, and I think we had got some consensus on some of them. So I think we all could do a little more to refresh our memory on what discussions we've had so far, and to look at Laura's document again, because that was a good document with background on the issues we needed to review.
Okay. Excellent. So I'm going to, is the board asked their questions of the AMS project? We're ready to move forward. All right, seeing no hands, let's go ahead and move on to the electrification and a customer complaint about the R1. Laura, Dave, do you want to take this, or do you want Laura to take this?
I was thinking you were taking it because I don't think I've seen the complaint.
All right. So I apologize then, because I have been busy this month, and apparently we are not prepared. So I'm going to bump this topic to next month, and I'll give a summary of what I've got. So there was a complaint months ago about some resident who had done a lot of electrification efforts, and she was noticing that she's hitting the tier 3, that she doesn't feel like the decision to get an EV to put in a heat pump was a good one, because the R1 rate is currently set up with a conservation philosophy rather than an electrification philosophy. So I'd hope to have a discussion around the electrification philosophy and the conservation philosophy that had been done before in rate structures, but this is under that rate philosophy discussion. Alice, you have a question?
You can finish your sentence and I'll raise mine afterwards.
Yeah, well, that was what I'd hoped to discuss, but we didn't prepare well, so I'd rather save the time today. I know Laura had mentioned a concern on Friday, and I was not able to email her because I was flying. So we'll follow up more later.
Okay, then I'll ask my question.
Go ahead.
It's about our rates and customer interface. So I think, to be fair, the board also received, I think, 2 other concerns from our customers. And I think both of those fall in the same category, not so much about our rate philosophy, but it's how we communicate about our rates to our customers. And I think there was a very good exchange between the CMLP staff and this particular resident who said, I didn't understand the PCA, and all of a sudden my bill is astronomical and I can't find any information. So it says to me that we have we've talked about this at the board, a responsibility to our customers to explain our rates in a very straightforward way. And whether we use news and notices, whether we do something on the website, whether we do a combination of things, I think people were stunned when they actually stopped to look at their rates. And it's because we, as an organization, have not done a very good job of communicating one-on-one with our employees. And I think the resolution of this one, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, was really good. I think Carol and staff were able to post some information on the website. I didn't go look for it. And the resident was at least pleased that the CMLP was responsive enough to post stuff. But the fact that people are made to go looking to understand their bill says that we're not doing our job on being able to communicate well with our customers. And I think there were 2 different emails that we received comments from that both related to that. So I think the same thing with this other customer whose rates were high is twofold. One is the communication side and the other is the rate philosophy side. We shouldn't let that go too long, because that person wrote to us quite a long time ago, and it impacts a lot of people. As you know, we are installing more electrical requirements like heat pumps. So I don't want to delay that conversation until we have time to put rate philosophy on. We've talked about that now for over a year, I think.
Yeah.
So we need to put attention to this and to solve that problem.
I agree. We're in October. We're going to be putting together rates for 2023. This is an important topic, and unfortunately, I did not get us well prepared. So I will bring it back in November, and yeah, so
That'd be great.
Great, and we'll do a better job than talking about the existing rates and how we can work with the existing system to make it more of a electrification focused structure. Laura, you have a comment?
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I just want to respectfully disagree a little bit with Ms. Kaufman about our failure to communicate with customers. We did put out a bill insert in July, specifically about the PCA, showing graphically what the impact would be on average and median customers. We did post something on our webpage on the rate section, also about the increase, and explaining to customers this wasn't a CMLP specific set of circumstances that caused us to raise rates, that other utilities, other entities were raising rates far higher than we were, and that it's sort of a function of worldwide energy situation, Ukraine, etc. So I feel like we did make an effort to reach out to customers, but if they don't look at their bill inserts, or they don't go to the webpage, I'm not sure, other than, maybe robo telephone calls, how else we can reach out, to customers to alert them to things that are changing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Laura,
And to add to that, after we sent that out, we did have a high volume of calls about what we sent and trying to understand it. And the customer service team handled all those. And we're not talking about one or two, we're talking about a number of calls. So
Yeah.
what we did send out was received by some, maybe not all, maybe not everyone saw it, but it did have the phone ringing. So.
yeah, and I do feel the light plant did do the bill insert, did do efforts to explain the PCA, but generally customers don't react until they see a change in the check they're writing, and then they're asking questions, and some may just pick up the phone. So yes, we'll continue to do good communication and good explanation on the customer service side, and I'm very happy that this board did the full 5-cent increase for the last 6 months, because it's still in the news about how natural gas prices are up. And so when you see your bill go up, some people will see the news and see other electric rates are going up, and they won't be as mad as if we did it mid next year because we fell behind. So I think communication is good. You can't, the bring a horse to water, you can't make them drink, you can only bring them there. So I'm sorry, it's 4 a.m. for me. I'm still a little batty. Let's move on to power supply. So with the next two topics in the agenda are going over power supply, how we contract for it, how it comes together. And then we're going to do a small executive session to share contract values so that we can understand what the pricing is separate from how we go out and pull this all together. And Dave, would you like to take this? Or would you like Laura to take this?
I believe Laura's going to take it and has stuff she wants to share on the screen. Yes.
Yes, please. So
Thank you, Laura.
Can people see this PowerPoint presentation?
I can see your presenter's view.
Laura, before you start, I just want to apologize. We have weed whacking and lawn mowing going on right now.
Oh, can you hear it?
So-
I'm sorry.
If you hear that, sorry.
That's all right.
Is there a better, is that a better one, or is it, no? I need something the other
Yeah,
screen. Sorry, hang on.
The screen you're sharing with Zoom is not the presented, but the presenter's view. There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I need to get back home again. There we go. All right, so now you have a PowerPoint in front of you and a weed whacker in the background. So the first point I'd like to make about power supply is that we have a number of objectives, and a lot of them revolve around risk mitigation. Basically what we're trying to do here is we have needs where our customers using electricity. We need to secure power supply to meet those needs.
Excuse
Sorry.
me, can I interrupt? I'm having a hard time hearing Laura. Do others have the same problem?
I'm having a problem.
Yeah.
Same.
Do you have a microphone or headphones? I think something's covering your microphone for your laptop.
Can you hear me better now?
A bit. It's less tinny.
Okay, how about now?
Not really.
All right, Dave is going to ask the weed whacker to stop. So,
Well, I don't think it's
I'm
weed
sorry.
whacker. I think it's your microphone. Laura, why don't you,
I'm sorry about the sound quality, guys. Okay, just turn the microphone all the way up. Did that help?
that did help. It's louder, just the quality is still kind of poor, but that, I think it's good enough for us to move forward.
The only other thing I could do is this. Does that sound any better?
That does.
Okay. All right then. So as I was saying, the goal of power supply is to secure enough electricity to meet our customer needs.
There's a problem here.
There's a buzzing now, just as you were ready to.
Probably the volume.
All right, let's try it again. Is this any better?
No, worse. Yeah, stopped. Okay. Nope.
The buzzing stopped?
No.
Let me go over to Dave's computer and see if that helps. Yeah, what do I do here?
So Laura, the buzzing just went away.
Let's see, is this any better?
That's good enough.
Mowing is stopped.
All right. Now did Laura freeze? Oh.
Is this any better?
Yes, why don't you keep speaking?
Okay.
That's great. That's great.
That's great. Okay, thank you, Jason, because he just solved that problem.
All right.
We're trying to meet the needs of the customers, and we need to engage in risk mitigation because we have a number of risks that we face. One is about price. As you know, the price of electricity and energy in general goes up and down, sometimes rather dramatically and volatilely. We have supply risk. Can we just get enough kilowatt hours at the right time to meet our customers' needs?
Laura,
yes.
Apologies. I think you're showing your web browser or your desktop.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, you're speaking to your presentation, right?
I'm trying.
Yes, and
I'm trying to do the right thing here.
we appreciate it.
Okay, can you see a PowerPoint?
What I see is a web browser with the 2022 power cost adjustment.
How is that possible?
It looks like you're sharing a desktop, not
No, but I'm just trying to share the other screen.
the presentation, not a screen.
Yeah, but so Jason, I'm trying to, this is screen 2. Okay, so I share
Well, I
that.
think these are duplicated.
There
So
you go.
this is
Oh,
Screen
yeah,
2.
you said there you go.
You think this is, are you looking at a PowerPoint now?
I am.
Oh my gosh.
A rough start.
All
But
right.
I think we're good. We got a microphone and we got a presentation.
So we're trying to address a number of risks. And one of the major ways we address these risks is through a diversification strategy. We contract for power at different times and for different lengths of time. We contract for different fuels, and we diversify the counterparties with whom we contract for power so that not all the risk lies with any one or two companies. I want to show you here what we're trying to meet. These are load profiles. It shows down on the x-axis. Those are the hours of the day. Hour ending 1, you don't see 2 because they can't all fit, but there are 24 hours in a day. And the graph on the left shows a typical winter day. This was from January 6th of 2022. And you can see my cursor, Brian?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so you can see in the winter, we tend to have what we call a double hump. There's a period of, very low usage in the middle of the night. People wake up, you get a usage, it then tends to go back down, and then we get a bigger hump in the evening. This right here would have looked more gradual like that, except we turn the ETS units on right around here. And so that tends to increase the usage, which is good because that's during a low part of the day. But one thing you should note here is that renewable resources like wind, which tends to blow at night, and solar, which tends to produce during the day, happen to be at the times of day when we don't need as much power. We actually need it in the morning from 6 to 9, and then we need it again in the evening, from 4 to 9 or 10. So that's a winter day. It looks very different in the summer. During hot days, we still have the low usage in the middle of the night, which is why we want to get EVs to charge during the night, because year round, that's a time period when we have a lot of spare capacity. But then in the summer, the load tends to grow just throughout the day, peaking usually around 6 or 7 in the evening, and then going back down. So we have a job to go contract for power that will deliver kWh when our customers need to use it. And that is different by season, by month. And obviously it does vary by the temperature, whether it's the Super Bowl, any number of factors affect usage. So one strategy that we've employed recently, and I just wanted to share this with you, is here is a solar resource we were thinking about contracting for. And solar produces a different amount during the winter than it does in the summer, and in a different shape. So in a typical January, you can see this solar curve, which is starting up, around 8 in the morning and going till 4. In the summer, you get much more solar, obviously, because there's more daylight hours, and it's spread out a little bit further. You can see it goes a little bit further into the night. But this is sort of an odd shape for us. As I said, when we were just looking at the chart, it's supplying energy kind of when we don't need it. So we actually went out and we paired this. So we bought the solar. It was a 20-year solar contract. And we paired it with a nuclear resource where we asked the nuclear supplier to give us varying amounts of energy by hour so that it created this fixed block. So that in the morning at hour ending 8, the nuclear supplier is giving us almost 50 megawatts because we're not getting very much from the solar. In the next hour, the nuclear is going to start to back off because we're starting to get more solar. And likewise, it's giving us the least amount of energy during the height of the solar production in the winter. What this does is this gives us a guaranteed, not guaranteed, but an expected 50 megawatts per hour for all of these on-peak hours. This also makes it more convenient to transact in the wholesale markets, which trade in these blocks. In the summer, the nuclear pairing is giving us different amounts of energy per hour to create the 50 megawatt block. You can see that it starts to give us more energy when we need it in the evening as the solar's falling off. So this pairing enabled us to contract for 20 years of solar, which was giving us Massachusetts Class 1 RECs. And we contracted, in this case, upfront, they would only let us go for 5 years because they had various regulatory hurdles they needed to meet in order to be able to offer firm power post 2029. So they promised an extension once they got that regulatory requirement met, which we have since executed. So the nuclear is now a longer term contract. It doesn't go all the way out to 43, but it does go a little bit further than 2029. So this enabled us to get the solar and also to meet more of what our actual needs are versus what the solar can provide. The nuclear also does give us emissions-free RECs, essentially, that count towards our goals. So
can you explain firm power?
So and this is, firm power is when a counterparty says, I will give you 50 megawatts at the Massachusetts hub during these hours for this time period. And if they don't give it to you, what you do is you assess them liquidated damages, which means you go out, if they fail to deliver their firm quantity, you can go out in the market, replace that power that they promised to deliver with another counterparty, and then charge them, the original counterparty that provided you with the firm power, the difference between what you had to pay to actually get it and what was your contract price. That's called liquidated damages. All the solar and wind that we contract for is called unit contingent, which means it's not firm. You're going to get whatever the resource produces, and that's it. So, I mean, this is the expected solar output, but it's going to be different. Days that are cloudy, we're not going to get this. And so unit contingent means you're going to take whatever it gives. So it's very important to have a backup resource to firm up that power, because you just don't know how much you're going to get. This is one of the risks and difficulties inherent in trying to contract for large quantities of renewable power to meet our customers' requirements. Any other questions about this particular slide before I move on?
No, it was a great explanation of firm versus contingent, and I'll leave it at that. 'Cause
Okay.
that's an important thing for the board to be educated on, is what contracts are firm and what contracts are contingent, because we're going to take power on contingent contracts whenever it's produced, whether it matches our load or not. And firm
Exactly.
power means we're taking it that amount at that time. And yeah, so continue. Sorry to distract.
No, that's fine. This is much better than the start, so I'm happy.
You sound
Okay.
great.
So here is a list of CMLP's current commitments for energy. And what I've provided here is, it tells you what type of fuel underlies the generation. So in this first category, it's a fossil facility. It runs on either natural gas or oil. Here's what we get out of the generation. It can be just energy. It can be energy and capacity. It can be energy, capacity, and RECs, or any combination of those. This tells you when the contract was executed, and I kind of put those in order here, when the term of the contract starts and when it ends. So this first contract is a 20-year fossil facility, and it comes with energy and capacity. So eventually, if you were to look at the price of these contracts, it's important to recognize what products come with the price, because if it's just energy, it should be lower priced. But if it comes with capacity, that's valuable. So you can pay a higher price for this contract, and it's not necessarily a worse deal than one that is lower priced, but just includes energy, because you're getting a more valuable product with it. So you can see over the years, we have attempted to embed in the portfolio a variety of fuel sources, not that much fossil, hydro, wind, solar, landfill, nuclear recently, and to some extent, we have embedded some market purchases in here where we need to mitigate price risk, but we've been unable to secure 100% of our needs through renewable contracts.
Yeah, so that was going to be one of my questions. The ISO market purchases, those day ahead purchases, the arbitrage that goes on. Can you explain a little bit about arbitrage and how we've contracted for some, and sometimes we've over contracted, but most often we've under contracted?
Right. So this basket of resources is designed to hedge about 80% of our needs. And when I say 80%, that's like on an annual basis. So let's say on an annual basis, we need 100,000 megawatt hours. This basket of resources would be designed to produce, say, 80,000. So we'd leave 20,000 that we would buy from the ISO spot market at spot market prices. Spot market just means current, nearby, as opposed to far away deferred. And, but that doesn't mean that each hour of each day is exactly 80% hedged. There might be hours where this basket of resources gives us more energy than we can use, and we have to sell it back to the grid during those hours. And there may be hours that we need to buy much more than 20%, because the basket does not perfectly follow our load. So we use the spot market to both fill in the megawatt hours that we don't forward hedge, and we do that on purpose. We don't want to forward hedge 100% because we want to leave some of our exposure to the spot market, but not too much. And the other thing we use the ISO grid for is to firm up our power. If that sun from our solar contract does not show up, we end up buying from the ISO grid. And typically, the way the grid runs right now, those megawatt hours are coming from gas-fired generation, because that is typically the unit on the margin for the New England ISO area. You know, that could change in the future, but right now that's kind of the way it is. And, you know, we have to think long and hard about what does it mean to have 100% emissions-free power. You know, we've been buying Massachusetts Class 1 RECs to fill in those megawatt hours that we're unable to contract directly from renewable resources. But in reality, you know, we're buying, it's not like we're getting emissions free every hour of the day. You can't. I mean, people can't predict when the sun and the wind are going to be available. And there has to be some form of generation, whether it's nuclear, gas, you know, whatever, has to be standing by to fill in what the renewables don't produce when you need them.
So just to do a quick summary, so the energy part of these contracts is where you can do that arbitrage, where we've done an 80% contracting and 20% we can go with the ISO and purchase. And the RECs are the certificates that say that it's a non-emitting resource. And the way that those are counted is basically tallying those at the end of the year to match the amount that you distributed to customers to get to 100%. But I also want to mention capacity. I don't know if you have a future slide about how the capacity comes together for our obligation.
I didn't do a slide specific to that, but what I will say is that Concord has a number of obligations as a member of the regional transmission operator grid. One of those is, you know, we need to have contracted for the energy that our customers use and to pay for it. But another one is that on an annual basis, we have to demonstrate that we've forward committed for enough capacity to cover our peak load. And capacity is a separate product from energy. I know it can be a little bit challenging to sort of visualize what it is because it's kind of a theoretical concept, but it's almost a fixed board game where there are a fixed number of pieces, and each player has to demonstrate that they've forward reserved enough of the pieces on the board to meet their maximum load. So all the generating units in New England, you know, let's say there's 30,000 megawatt hours. And the ISOs determine that people have to demonstrate that they've come up with, you know, that they need to meet 30,000. Each player is assigned a portion of that, and it's based on your relative percentage of the peak. So let's say CMLP ends up being 1% of that 30,000, then we would need to demonstrate that we'd forward committed to 1% of 30,000 of capacity and show the ISO which units those are so they don't get double counted. Because somebody else, if I say I've got this one reserved for me to meet my capacity obligation, someone else can't use the same unit and say, hey, I'm using that one too. Everything has to just add up to the total fixed installed capacity.
Right, and the role of ISO New England in the capacity, in managing a capacity market, is to ensure that we have enough generators in New England to generate the electricity to meet that summer peak load.
Exactly.
This is not something we could do arbitrage for with capacity. This is not something that we can just tally up and count. It's what our peak was, sets our obligation, and then we have to contract with generators to say, we're partnered up for this moment when everybody needs electricity and you're going to supply me. Is that a good summary?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So this is actually all I had for the public session, Brian. In the executive session, there'll be more detail on this.
Okay. So
And then,
questions?
Laura, no, I was just going to say, Laura, you have a great graphic of this as well. Is that still on the public website, on the CMLP website?
Yes, you're talking about, yes, it is.
Yeah,
It
yeah. So
is-
just awareness, because it does show that 20% that your threshold that we sort of have to plan against.
If you go
Right,
to
but it's
the-
only based on
sorry.
what we have contracted for, right? So go ahead.
if you go to the CMLP website and you choose electric services, there's a tab called Power Supply Portfolio. That talks a lot about what we've just discussed today and has some more information, including some of our historical percentages of renewable energy, and then has that graph that Wendy's talking about that shows from 2016 through 2030 what our actual and forecasted energy supply is going to be by resource.
Excellent. Are there any questions for Laura from the board about the mechanics, not the pricing? Did everybody feel they grasp the content? Okay. Is there any public questions? Warren, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is very helpful and it's good to know. And when we present this to the public, I think we have to be careful about what we're saying and claiming. If we are buying power from a solar facility, for example, and a wind facility, and we are not buying and retiring the RECs, all we're getting is generic power. We're not getting solar power or wind power because it's the party that purchased the RECs that can claim that they've gotten that renewable generation. We can, of course, say we've entered into a contract with a solar generator, but what we're getting delivered is just generic system power.
Yeah. So there are emissions related to it if we do not have the renewable certificate to match with it.
And we agree with that, Warren, 100%. And that's what we do. We don't claim a renewable if we're selling the REC, and we don't sell the RECs anymore anyway. So.
And the graphic shows that as well, if I recall.
Yeah, the power supply graphic does show that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
But the main concept I wanted to make sure people understood is power or energy purchasing, contracting, the concept of arbitrage, capacity, and the contracting that goes on to ensure that the New England has enough generators to meet the maximum load, and the RECs and the what are they called, Laura, for the nuclear
effects.
You know, making sure that the accounting is that we, for every kilowatt hour that we sold, that we have, or megawatt hour that we sold, that we have a REC or a some non-emitting certificate to match with it. And it's important that we describe our energy as non-emitting and not describe it as renewable, although portions of it, like solar and wind, are renewable. Nuclear is not considered renewable, but it is non-emitting. And so I know that the language is cleaned up around that as well. Any other board questions? Okay, Pamela. Pamela Drip, sorry.
Thank you, Pamela, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. Thank you, Laura. As always, you make the complex understandable and clear. And you too, Brian, for trying to educate us about how this really complicated thing works, and David as well. I really appreciate what you guys do. As one of the things that struck me about this presentation was that storage, battery storage wasn't included as part of the system. And when we get the solar and wind and other facilities, when they start adding storage capacity to the facilities, then it will no longer be so variable and we'll be able to do fixed, won't we? Could we
Correct.
not? Could we
Correct.
not? Also, we need Concord itself to be a power generator, a distributed power generator, including battery.
Right. Well, so Pamela,
storage.
this is about how we contract for power and what we contract. So in-town generation may not, and storage may not fit perfectly into that, but yes, we're working on that and it is coming. There is the storage does not create energy. It provides potentially some capacity value, but it doesn't provide any emissions certificates as well. So it's about making those intermittent resources dispatchable. That's what storage can do, and make so you could firm contract if they had enough batteries, a solar array.
Yes.
Right now we're what was the term, Laura? It was not wasn't intermittent, it was contingent.
Sorry, unit contingent.
Unit
Unit contingent.
Yeah, so any kind of generation without any kind of solar or wind without a battery could only be unit contingent. Batteries make that firm, but they may
Right.
not make all of it firm based on the size of the battery. It gets complicated.
Yes.
But I wanted to just focus on contracts for this discussion.
So if we contract for local battery, we can do that adjustment ourselves.
Well, I
Put
don't
it
want
back on when, if we fill up the batteries whenever power supply is cheap.
Yes, that's
we
arbitrage.
can-
So,
Yes. So we can
Pamela,
arbitrage.
I don't want to divert our contract discussion into storage. I'd like to keep with discussing the contracts because we're going to go into executive session later to talk about that. So if you want to make more of a general public comment, I'm going to get there in just a second.
That was it for things like we're subsidizing the heat pumps and electric vehicles, electric use. We're encouraging and subsidizing. We also need to encourage and subsidizing the solar generation plus battery.
Yep.
Locally, so that we have the infrastructure in our town to supply our own energy eventually.
And we agree with you.
And so we need to make the investment. So we need to raise the rates, not have as our only goal keeping rates low. We need to have also as our goal making these investments that will turn us completely green.
We are pretty close to that today. So let me go back to the
And all
discussion
the power,
topic.
not
Pamela?
just the stuff that
Pamela,
we
I'm sorry,
sell.
I have to cut you off. All right. So is there any other board questions related to how this works, how the markets work that you'd like to ask for contracting? Seeing none, we are going to go to our next topic, which is public liaison comments, and then we'll go into executive session to talk about the pricing related to these contracts. Are there any public comments? I don't see any. Now we're going to move into executive session. And
Brian, on that.
You need a vote.
We need a roll
Yeah.
call vote, and whoever does it needs to read the
Read the
reason why
language.
we're going into it.
So
Sorry.
I'll volunteer to do that, Brian.
okay, thank you.
So I'd like to propose that pursuant to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts open meeting law, purpose for executive session number 10 to discuss trade secrets or confidential, competitively sensitive or other proprietary information, that we move into executive session for that discussion.
Okay. Roll call vote. Pam?
Yes,
Need a second?
Oh, sorry, you need a second. All right, Wendy, Pam, do
I
you second?
second it.
second.
Okay.
Second.
Pamela, or Pam Hill, you said yes?
Yes.
Okay. Wendy
Yes.
and Warren
Yes.
and Alice.
Yes.
And I agree as well. So we're going to move into executive session. Thank you very much for attending, and we will see you on November 9th.